Welcome to Serenity Rising Healing with Cancer. I'm Bron and I want to welcome you to not just a podcast, but to a community, a new way of seeing, feeling and walking through the chaos of cancer. So welcome back to Serenity Rising. Today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to because we're going somewhere that doesn't get talked a lot about enough. What happens to the emotional body when the physical body is fighting for its life? So my guest today has spent over 35 years helping people do that work, including many living with serious illness. So Ben, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Bron. Very happy to join you. It's nighttime here.
It's night for you and an afternoon for me. But so now tell me a little bit about yourself. So rather than me read out a bio, I'd love you to tell us how you got here.
From a very early age, I was drawn to Native Americans, and of course, that's expanded to other indigenous cultures over the years. But the fascination continued to grow into adolescence. And when I first learned about the traditional Native doctors, the kinds of visionary experiences they would have, many of them even possessing paranormal abilities, that fascinated me to no end. And I started making plans. I was saving money. And by the time I was 17, I took off on my own, made it as far as Oklahoma, landed in a community that was predominantly Kiowa Indians. And I was going into the peyote meetings, sitting up all night with the Native elders. And this, again, as a teen. And it was in one of these meetings that I first met my mentor, Horace Daukei, the last of their really powerful doctors. And I was terrified, that I can't teach you these things. This is only for Native people. But he took me on, and the apprenticeship was so intensive, he would transmit portions of his own healing gifts. And in order to earn the right to work with these gifts of healing, one is expected to go through the vision quest, which typically entails fasting the 4 days and nights without food and water, alone in the mountains. So Horace would do these transmissions. I started going on the vision quest, and then gradually I was assisting him as he was working to help people with a wide range. On the first instances was a man who was seriously injured when a front end loader turned over and he was pinned underneath, leaving the man paralyzed from the waist down. And Horace had me doing this thing, actually drawing blood clots out of the back of the man's leg. And I was in absolute shock when I saw the blood clots come out. It's like, it worked. But I was still very fearful, hesitant, like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. What if I hurt somebody? And so I parked myself back in college for a few years and needed to reassemble myself. And then it was coming time for graduation. And that's when I began to work with people, around that time. But it was challenging because the fact that I carried a lot of trauma from my childhood and adolescence. And when that transmission began to awaken inside of me, it was like pouring hydrogen peroxide into a deeply infected wound, and all this was coming out. So I had a lot to work through. But that's how I got my start in this. I was dealing with that trauma, working through it, and a lot of it was playing out in romantic, or my attempts at romantic relationships. And so there definitely was a lot of flailing at that time. And when you have that working itself through you and you're in that cycle of reenactment, you're not thinking all that clearly. But in the midst of that, gradually I was working with people here and there, and people are coming to me with a wide range of anything, just all kinds of anxiety and depression. People had their own traumatic experiences, heart disease, stroke, digestive disorders, people with physical injuries, cancer, just...
Wow.
And it's been very much a learn as I go process. In years past, there were many, many extraordinarily powerful Native doctors. Among the Native Americans, you had some of the most powerfully gifted healers on the entire planet. And my mentor was mind-blowingly powerful. Like, I would see him do things like close open wounds and other things that, if not border, that actually are, in that realm of paranormal.
Yes.
And so I learned as much as I could from him. And then I was, kind of in that lost in the desert space during much of my 20s. And then I started going back for the vision quest. the 4 days and nights without food and water alone in the mountains. So there's, two things going on simultaneously. It's like I was working through my own emotional wounding, healing the trauma that I carried, and at the same time, gradually, as I'm healing and becoming more resilient, my practice is growing, and I'm working with more people coming with, as I said, just such a wide range. And a lot of times, in the beginning, I really didn't know much about a lot of these issues, whether, I have someone come to me with childhood sexual trauma, and I didn't
Yeah,
really
right.
understand anything about that. I'm thankful I wasn't
Mm.
abused in that way
Mm.
with everything
Mm.
else I dealt with. But, so having to learn. And then when people come in with autoimmune disorders and cancer, and it's like the traditional native doctors, they were known for their areas of specialization. Some of them work primarily with neurological issues, others, say, with digestive. So they were known as specialists among their own people and even among allied tribes, people who travel for great distances. I haven't had that luxury of specializing so much.
Mm.
I mean, I do have areas where I've seen tremendous results, and it's like, oh yeah, that's easy to work with. I've worked with lots of people with this. But because there's people with such a wide range of health-related issues coming to me, it's like I'm continually learning and learning. And I spend a lot of time reading and studying. And when I'm not doing sessions, that's much of my free time is doing continually educating myself. And doing a lot of practice too, because I also train with the Chinese master in the internal martial arts, Xin Yi Quan, Zong, and rooted in these Taoist systems that go back thousands of years. And so there's in the Hindu Vedic system and the Taoist system, it's an ongoing discipline. You're continually developing your body and mind. And also among the Native American, it's the more you develop, the more proficient you become, like the more powerful, the more presence you carry, that you can be a greater assistance to those you work with.
And during those times, because obviously you've done a lot of work and continued working, obviously you've had these incredible opportunities to learn from, people who have had, that's been passed down for thousands of years. So bringing it back into now sort of thing, do you feel like with all of the different, as I always say, adversity comes in all shapes and sizes. So when someone is living through a serious adversity, do you see any like common themes that come through that I'm not into the blame and shame causative factor, but we know that there's stuff that influences disease as such. Have you seen, like, what are you seeing? Like, obviously you've seen a lot of serious illness over many, many years. Is there something that's, a theme that's come through from what you've learned and treated?
Wow.
Big question.
Yeah, it doesn't sound all that focused, but let me see what I can do with it. So people live through such a wide range of experience, and what they carry based upon their experience. I grew up with a lot of physical and emotional abuse, a lot of trauma, and I see a lot of people who have, and it's very evident. I see and feel the emotional wounding, like we internalize our lived experiences. And, even as a child, we could internalize a lot of the emotional wounding of our parents, their attitudes or judgments towards us, the whole relational dynamic. We have our emotional response to that. So we carry that. A lot of times there's these patterns of reenactment that many of us get trapped in. And it varies so widely because if someone develops um, uh, say, autoimmune disorder or cancer, you know, it can manifest a lot of the adverse experiences that we live through and the subsequent, all that distressing emotion, the stress we carry, and over time that can be, and I definitely do not want to say in any way that all emotion or all, you
Agreed.
know, illnesses like cancer, because there are a lot of environmental factors
Yeah.
There's genetic factors, but I feel that the stress can be precipitating. It can encourage it. Is that the best word? It
Yes.
can
Yeah.
increase its likelihood, let's say. And so I look at all these things, but it's going to manifest differently. Of course, not everyone who experiences certain kinds of adversity or stressful experiences is going to develop that autoimmune disorder or cancer or heart
Yeah.
disease or stroke or something. But as individuals, we have certain predispositions, we have certain vulnerabilities or weaknesses. And so if the stresses would more likely to kind of shift us in that direction, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And then you have a lot of people that maybe they can just hang on till in their 90s or something, and maybe they don't necessarily, they have their discomforts and, they're fairly healthy in many respects, but it's not expressing itself so much through the body. They just have this, like a tractor, they just kind of plow through
Yeah. Keep
things.
going.
Yeah, keep going. And so I have this fascination with people. One of my favorite quotes is, the more I learn, the more I realize I have yet to learn, or I don't know yet, or I'm constantly, because of all the intensive practice that, I do a lot of internal Qigong practice. I develop my own system of meditation practices, and that developed out of the fact that I've gone through so much trauma, and these practices were one of the first steps in healing that emotional wounding. I teach these practices to nearly everyone I work with, as long as they're lucid and they speak English. Sometimes I'm in India, Sri Lanka, working with people who don't speak English. I can't instruct them unless there's someone to translate for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, where is I going with that? We have different makeups, different constitutions. And so there's a lot of people who can live with stress and adversity. And I'll see certain commonalities, like when there's childhood physical, sexual trauma, and I look I scan the body because of all this intensive practice. This is where I was starting to go earlier.
Mm.
The meditation practices I do, the Qigong, going through the Vision Quest, I developed this ability to feel and look into people's bodies. And I feel and see what they're carrying, the emotions they're holding. And a lot of times with that trauma, there's, like we have the physical body, but there's what they refer to as subtle bodies. There's a lot written about that. You can go to Wikipedia where they talk about chakras and the aura and all that. And there's a lot of new agey stuff that just gets too foo-foo and too flaky, and it just annoys me. But if you look in these ancient systems, whether Buddhist or Hindu Vedic and Taoist, systems, they talk about these subtle bodies, and it's a lot of what helps to sustain the physical body, the organs and systems, and all this. So I'm seeing and feeling that, and a lot of what I'm seeing and feeling is actually like the emotions that, like all this residue of, the anger and the hurt and the frustration and the anxiety and the grief and sadness, all these things that haven't processed. It's just the body holds on to it indefinitely. And all these lived experiences that they've gone through, things going back to childhood and neglect and the abuse and, relationships. A lot of people many of us, we want to find a life partner and someone that we can love and be loved by and partner up early and, having these 50, 60 or more year loving partnerships. And not everyone has that good fortune. And a lot of people go through a lot of messy relationships, divorces, ghostings, other kinds of devastating losses. And people carry that. And I feel that in people's bodies. And when I would be teaching classes on a weekly basis, and at the end of class, I'd tell people, like, hey, if you like, I could look for you and tell you what I see. And people are like, wow, you can see that? And that convinced a lot of people they wanted to work with me individually, because it's like, damn, he sees that. He's got something going on there. I didn't tell him any of this, and he picked it up right off.
Yeah.
And
it's called a gift,
so,
but it's a worked gift. Let me put it out there. You worked and you did the hard work
very hard
to
work.
capture and grow that gift. And what you're
There's
saying
different
is
sides to it.
there is.
As being on an
And
airplane, when you're super empathic, you're on the airplane and you're feeling everything that everyone's
well, you're
telling you.
feeling everyone's fear of the damn plane, aren't you? But
Y-
but that's the thing. I feel that I was reading a book. I'm reading a book at the moment, which I can never remember the name of it. It's Dr. Seagull, and it was written it's written 50 or nearly 50 years ago.
Mhm.
Love and Miracles, and he
Yeah.
talks about physicians hugging their patients in the corridor and the gift of passing through that feeling. But it's all about, I think, when you're carrying the emotion and, if people slow down enough, which as I talk about, if we slow down enough and we hit the pause, it then has the opportunity to come forward. And, like you, Ben, you'll see it, but that person needs to get to the point where they're ready to go, okay, I can deal with this. And, I worked with Kerry for 2 years after the multiple myeloma diagnosis for this exact reason. And, one of the questions that I want to bring around to you, because obviously we talk about serenity a lot, through your experience, like I know how I would define serenity, but what word would you use to define your serenity? Like it's not going to be serenity, but yeah.
There's a sense of well-being that comes from when you grow up with a lot of trauma, emotional wounding, this longing, desperation, hunger, neediness, grief, pain that's stored in your body, and you work through that, you're coming out the other side. And there's more of an acceptance and equanimity. And, but that can show up in a lot of ways, too, because when we have financial security, when we are partnered with someone that we can love and be loved by. So serenity has many dimensions to it.
It does. Which is why
Yeah.
we're talking today, because I really believe in that third space of science and soul, evidence, perspective. This is the important stuff, because this is not part of a treatment plan when you're going through and living through cancer. So what I'd love to hear about is, how do you help someone who is going through or doing the work of living through cancer when you're dealing with the fear, the grief, and the emotional weight of what that feels like, based on what you've talked about, which is a lifetime of emotion that has not been released and resolved?
Well, I will say that for me, it can be challenging, for one, because I feel deeply.
Yeah.
I got into this work because I care deeply about people. And so, working with the young mother, for instance, and she has advanced cancer. So that's going to
Mm.
impact me. So there are a lot of different factors. Like I have to work through my own emotional responses to seeing that. Again, it really hits me emotionally.
Mm.
But I work with people facing so many kinds of health crises, and working with people with cancer and other forms of illness, especially when the stakes are so high. I'm
Mm.
not sure if that's the best way to phrase it, but well, we'll go with that
No,
for
it's
now.
real. That's a reality of it.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much involved. And sometimes, well, I'll give you an example of a woman that I worked with some years ago. And she had initially breast cancer. I knew her like quite a few years back. I worked with her years prior, and I didn't see her for a couple of decades because I had left New Mexico, but during that interim time, I had developed breast cancer, and while she was in the hospital, um, undergoing treatment, her daughter took the debit card and drained the bank account. and
Wow.
yeah, the daughter
No
was a bit
words.
of a sociopath. She,
Wow.
yeah, it
Oh,
was just horrendous. And then, so the daughter had gone through, years later, a daughter had gone through lap band surgery and was having all these major complications. And so this woman reached out to me and had me come down, arranged for me to come down to New Mexico to work with her daughter, the same daughter who drained the bank account. Mother's love, will go beyond a lot of the
unconditional.
betrayals and all that. Yeah. So I get down there, and before I could get there, this woman, they found a malignant tumor in her occipital lobe. And
Wow.
they went in, surgically removed it, and they did some other laser treatment, cauterizing those cells, so that in case they didn't want any additional growth. And so by the time I got there, she couldn't walk or stand without getting dizzy and falling, couldn't drive anymore, couldn't see to read. And so here I was there and for staying over in Albuquerque for, I think, about 10 days or so. So every day we were doing a session. And day after day, she was improving and she was up and standing and walking again. And she was reading and driving again, all that. But it's a very challenging situation too, because when I work with people, there are multiple aspects to healing. Like the sessions, I'm having them bring to their awareness, like, what's going on with them. There's all kinds of challenges that people face. Like when I was listening to you earlier, some of your previous episodes, and you were talking about like some of the emotions that surface, with the diagnoses and, questions, am I going to survive this and all that? And so I start out the sessions and I have the individual bringing these issues to the forefront of their awareness, acknowledge what's the reality, what they feel in response to it, where the feelings reside in their body, center their awareness in the depths of the feelings and breathe softly and deeply and follow these feelings as they go through their progression. Feelings can often initially intensify, or maybe anger can turn to grief, to sadness, to acceptance. It's one of many possible progressions, but just follow them and make sure you breathe all the way down to your abdomen. Expand your rib cage, really slow and full, and pause briefly, and then very slow exhale, pause again. And this is important because, again, not all cancer is based on distressing emotion and trauma and all that.
Yeah.
A lot of it could be genetic, environmental, but we're all faced with challenges, and the stresses we encounter or that we experience. And as you mentioned on a previous episode, where suppressed emotion increases the inflammatory markers. And so,
it does.
and the fact that most people haven't learned to work effectively with their emotions, they're inadvertently like turning up that inflammation. And so as I work with people too, I'm addressing, the dietary factor, because I want to know what they're eating. There are foods that feed the cancer, feed inflammatory responses, and which cancer is an inflammatory disorder. We need to educate ourselves about diet. So that's part of my work as well. And then we need to clean up our lives, because if we're subjected to this woman that I mentioned, like her daughter was extremely abusive, and the mother was buying the girl cigarettes and buying her booze. I mean, she's
enabling her.
Enabling, yeah.
Straight enable.
Yeah. And so, I was trying to communicate this with her and, she just cut off at some point. I've worked with people with cancer and I've seen them just go into remission and stay indefinitely. But there are some cancers that I have found that need consistent intervention, just to hold it back, just keep holding it back indefinitely. And I've seen people live quite long times. I am very cautious about making promises. I don't want to build false hopes or expectations, because if someone asks me, I'm just going to tell them, look, I really don't know. This is where I have had success before. I work as a conduit. It's not me. I work as a conduit like Indigenous healers do, to allow this presence to work through me. Number of people that have experienced success, but I am not going to claim that. I'll just say these people have experienced successes, but this is not something I can guarantee. It's like, let's go in, let's do the work, and let's get the best result you can. There have been instances too where people have called me, like, a friend or family member at the last minute, basically. Well, not necessarily last minute, but within a day of the person's departure. And so I'm going in at the very, very end, and the person's just riddled with cancer, just eaten up, and excruciating pain and maximum dose of morphine, and just out of it, because they're so heavily medicated. And working with them, and like this one woman in Albuquerque, that working with her, and after doing the session, And that was so intense too, because I'm working with her and I could feel that she was processing like a whole lifetime of all of this, everything she had gone through. But she's actually, after the session, she's conversing coherently with me, her daughter and son-in-law. And then next day she was like sitting up in bed on her own, and she was relatively pain-free. With some help, she stood, took a bath, and toward the end of the day, her life force was withdrawing from the extremities, and then had some
Yeah.
shortness of breath and peacefully just exited the body. So there are times when I will assist people in making that transition. Again, this is really tough for me emotionally because, I care about
I
people
bet.
and wanting happily ever after, but realistically, was it the book, got Jim Morrison, No One Gets Out of Here Alive. We're all
That's
making a
exactly
transition at
right.
some point. Yeah.
And as you're talking, I think it's really important for our listeners to understand that it's not about the destination. It's not about the cure. It's not about the healing. It's about how we get there. Because I
Mm,
feel that when you're asking for an expectation of, oh my God, am I going to be cured? Are you going to cure me? There's the underlying factor there of the deep-seated fear of why you're even asking that question in the first place, which is why, for me, I talk about healing because not everyone gets a cure, but every single person can go on a path of healing. The person that you've just mentioned, that beautiful woman,
yeah.
she was able to leave this lifetime in the most beautiful way versus
Mhm.
carrying a lifetime of emotions that weren't brought forward. So I feel like as you were talking, I'm going, yes, yes, yes. And it's just understanding of what is happening here. And that is that you are looking after you.
Mhm.
You're making decisions for you, and Ben is there giving you a gift of being able to cleanse and let be, or I think the word digest and process and all of those experiences without the expectation of, well, I'm expecting a cure at the end. That is not how it works. It's much more, and I believe that's my take. I mean, what do you think?
I take each person individually because I've assisted a number of individuals in making their transition, and dying is a part of life.
It is.
And I've also worked with quite a few people that not just cancer, but there's something I refer to as a failing that takes place in the organs and systems as people age. And sometimes, there are different factors involved, just our constitution is weakening, and then you have, maybe there's some degree of dissociation. So with that, and a lot of these people don't meet the clinical definition of someone with a dissociative disorder, but a large
Mm.
percentage of our human populace is dissociated. I think all of us are really to varying degrees, but some very much so. And so their grasp on their physical body is more tenuous. They don't have that firm a grasp. They're just not quite as resilient. And then too, like you have elderly people, and a lot of times if, there's a cold or flu or some other COVID, when that happened, I lost people that have been part of my life, during COVID.
Wow. I'm sorry to
And
hear that.
yeah. And so, but I've worked with people on many occasions where, either they confided in me or they told a friend or family member that they didn't expect to be around all that much longer. And then we're doing the sessions, and they're processing, they're digesting so much of what they've gone through, what they're holding in their bodies, their lived experiences and their emotions, and their body is, all its organs and systems are becoming much more resilient. And I've had a number of these individuals stick around like another 10, 15 or more years. There's an
Mm.
elderly man. I guess it's okay to mention his name. He's passed now, Maurice. And he had that, and he ended up living till 96, I think, or 95,
Good
96.
man. Good man.
He, he would drive to the subway station to pick me up, and his car literally is held together by duct tape. It's kind of embarrassing with all this clutter in his car, and he'd pull out in front of people. And it's like, put my hand over my face. It's like, oh God, I don't want anyone to see me. It's embarrassing, uh, but it was, there were times where I could see where, like I said, some people, he had that dissociative element. And sometimes when people are close to death, I could look and I see those subtle bodies. And that's part of what anchors us into the physical body. And I could see that coming unraveled. It was like, that panic on my part. And it's
Wow.
like, I gotta work really
Yes.
hard, and,
Yeah.
it stabilized him. But, a lot of times there's more serious, like, health complications that a lot of these individuals are dealing with,
Yeah.
whether someone suffered a stroke um, or just like I said, the organs and systems failing, or someone with
Yeah.
cancer, and a lot of times I've worked with people, and and this is the main part of the work. I've described the practice part where I'm
Yeah.
guiding them through the practice. The practice too, that helps people to become more embodied. But when I do the work on the table, they're laying on the massage table. Indigenous healers serve as conduits, like Native Americans, for instance, not having the modern medical interventions. Of course, nobody had them way back there, but
Mm.
living in the wild. And so you go through these experiences. First, now, most of the native doctors, they apprenticed at some point, and the older doctor would, toward the end of their life, transmit all or a portion of their own gifts. And then you go through the vision quest. When I go through the vision quest, there are periods where I feel this extraordinarily powerful presence descend into my body. And I could feel this presence like, I would have all these traumas come up, memories going all the way back to early childhood and things I'd completely forgotten. I'd be reliving that, all the vivid sensory
Wow.
impressions, all the emotions, I'd be digesting that. And then the same presence would be working through me when I would be assisting people during the individual sessions. And so people are on the table and people's experience varies. A lot of people go through life numbing, suppressing, disconnecting from their emotions or avoiding issues or realities they don't want to deal with. And so there could be a much greater numbing, disconnect, dissociation. They don't register as much. If they
Yeah.
continue with the sessions, that sensitivity, that awareness will open up. They will become much more aware, in touch with what's going on. But some people are pretty sensitive right from the start. And so as I work with them, they feel this presence working within their body, doing reconstructive work. And,
Wow.
and so as I'm working with them, I could feel that those changes, um, sometimes say if I'm working with someone with ulcerative colitis and they're in a lot of pain or passing blood in their
Mm.
stools, I could feel the repair taking place within the digestive tract. And so, after maybe 5 or 6 sessions and they're no longer passing blood in their stools and no longer in physical pain and they get to where they could eat what they want to eat. Some people progress quickly. One thing I noticed is that the more people suppress their emotions, the more locked up and rigid they are emotionally, the body
Yeah.
isn't nearly as malleable and responsive. But the
Yes.
more I can get them into their feelings and physical bodies and they're processing those emotions, the body becomes more fluid and malleable and the change is much, much greater. Sometimes I feel it right off. Someone comes in and there's this, I could feel the armoring. I could feel that
Yeah.
rigidity and
Yeah.
I feel that sense of lack of fluidity and just this kind of denseness about them. And if I can get them to stick around and do a handful of sessions, then that sensitivity will open up. But, a lot of people go through life and they're purposely turning that off.
That's right. And like one of the questions I was going to ask you is exactly around this. So if someone was listening now and they were either living through cancer or their loved one or even a professional supporting someone through cancer and they are in that state, because the thing is, I don't know, like for me, I didn't know what I didn't know until I realized. So when that person is right there, Ben, in that very first conversation that you may have, and you do feel the armor, what's something you could say to our listener who's wondering how the heck do they start this process to open up their sensitivities and actually start processing through the baggage or the emotions that they've been carrying.
That's the practice I described earlier.
Yeah.
So the basic steps are, we're all faced with adversity, challenge
Yeah.
in one way or another. So if you're dealing with, here's the reality of the cancer diagnosis, what does all that entail? Like some of the questions you mentioned in a previous episode, will I survive? What about my
That's
loved
it.
ones? Will I be here for them?
Mm.
It's like I do sessions, I spend considerable amount of time, but there are times when an individual with cancer or some kind of other catastrophic condition, life-threatening or debilitating or whatever, and they desperately need help, but they don't really have all that great a means. And, being trained by a native doctor, and in this tradition, you are not supposed to turn people away if someone genuinely needs help. There's
Wow.
traditionally, among these doctors and these tribes, someone approached you and they gave according to their means. Now, if someone has financial means, they can compensate me quite well. And maybe I'll even ask for a bit more, if they're quite well off, because my fees are, a lot of people tell me they're lower than they should be. But then there are other individuals I know they just don't have the means. And it's like, hey, just get in here, get your ass on the table. Let's go to work.
Yeah, that's
we
it.
need to deal with this. Yeah, just, I didn't go into this because I just wanted to make a lot of money. There's so many other professions I could have made way more than I make. But back to the practice though, because people
Yes.
need to hear this.
They
And
do need to hear this.
yeah, so whatever your reality is, like I said, the questions like you had posed earlier in another episode, like, will I survive, and my family, and the financial. I've worked with people with cancer and other serious health issues, and they were abandoned by a partner. And so they're dealing with the grief and, the devastation of the loss of their relationship in addition. So start out, what's happening? 2, what do you feel in response to it? Sadness, grief, frustration, fear, anxiety. And there's a whole range of emotions. You could also do this practice when it doesn't always have to be distressing emotions. If you're feeling that sense of bonding or comfort, you appreciate the love and connection you have with someone who's there supporting you. You can work with feelings like this too. Where do you feel that love for someone within you? So you can work with the whole range of emotion. But again, with, say, if someone is, with cancer, other serious illness, it's another thing that happens with cancer as well, or someone who suffered a stroke. We have these defensive mechanisms, this defensive armor we build up. We go through life and we're numbing and avoiding and pushing, sweeping a lot of things under the rug. We just don't want to go there or deal with things. But when you develop a catastrophic illness, or if you experience a serious injury, you're in an automobile accident, you're really banged up, if you undergo surgery, cuts through all that or breaks apart all this defensive armoring, and all these emotions are leaking out, years or decades of all this stuff you haven't dealt with. It's all flooding you. And so a lot of times I'm working with these individuals, and it's like I'm working with the physical illness itself. And I'm cleaning up this huge mess of decades of emotions they haven't dealt with, and all this toxic trauma and everything. But again, acknowledge what's happening. What's the reality in your life? 2, what do you feel in response to it? 3, where are the feelings residing within your body? It's both feelings and physical sensations.
Yep.
Grief, sadness, anger, frustration, hurt, disappointment, insecurity, just
There's
what are the feelings?
so many.
So many, yeah.
So many. And I
And
love
then
that. Yeah, keep going.
bring as much awareness as you can into the depths of the feelings. Are they in your throat, your abdomen, deep within your chest, or some other part of your body? And as you do so, breathe very softly, deeply, all the way down to your abdomen, expanding your abdomen, then your chest cavity, rib cage. Hold your breath briefly, and then very slowly all the way out. Pause at the bottom of the exhalation, and just keep doing that. Initially with your eyes closed, be as present as you can with these emotions. If it feels too overwhelming, which sometimes it can, go for a walk. Go walk with the emotions, because being on the earth that helps to ground, makes these emotions more bearable, more manageable. Sometimes when I've had people, I've worked with people and they were fearful of not surviving, for instance, one of the things that I've done, version of the practice that I've gone through with them is that, okay, well, we don't exactly know the outcome as of yet, but you're here right now. And I would say, well, just feel deep within, feel deep inside of yourself. And you feel this presence underneath it all. You can feel that, can you not? And just understand there's a part of you that lives through all time and all creation. Like all of us we're here in our bodies for a certain length of time, whether it's 100 years or, like some people come into this world, don't even survive hours. But we're all on this journey here on planet Earth. But deep underneath it all, there's this presence. And I get them into that and breathing, feeling this underlying presence, stillness. Sometimes in the worst of most painful periods of my life, I would breathe through that pain and I could feel this presence, this connection to a higher power underneath that. And I would center my awareness in that and I keep breathing with that. And sometimes I would feel everyone and everything else falling away from me. And I would just keep breathing with that deep underlying presence. And it's important to understand that this part of us is eternal. So whatever happens to the body, however long we're here on this earth, even if we live to be 100, we carry this presence. And to learn to tap into that, because there are distressing moments. I spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka and I'm scheduled to go back in a few months.
Oh, nice.
And a lot of time in the former war zone. And a number of my friends are former LTTE, former Tamil Tigers. And you talk to them and say, we didn't want the war. It's just,
No, that's
they were
right.
killing us. The government side, we were fighting for our survival. But anyway, many of my friends, they're family members, close family members, parents, child, siblings, friends, were killed, sometimes execution style, when the government forces were advancing, or killed in shelling, and sometimes even right in front of their eyes.
Wow.
And so I've had a lot of interaction with people, and I got to speak at the main hospital in Kilinochie, which was the de facto capital of the LTTE, Tamil Tigers, and a lot of the hospital staff.
Okay.
They were there in the killing fields, basically. I mean, they told the Red Cross, do not tell the Sri Lankan government military the coordinates of our field hospital, because they are targeting the hospital itself, which is a war crime. And no one was held accountable for that. And you see what's happening in Ukraine with, all the horrific things that Russia has done to the people of Ukraine.
Yeah.
So life in this world is very tenuous. Some people enjoy this physical resilience, but none of us really know for sure how long we're here on this planet.
Exactly.
And so however long we're here on this journey, I mean, I really enjoy working with people individually, whether it's, cancer or whatever challenges they're facing. I always have this fascination, curiosity, and because I care deeply about people, it's like I want to see each person live to the fullest, live their full life and realize their potential and what they're here to do and, their purpose. And
when you were talking about the practice, and when you really listen it, guys, and when you're listening to what Ben's saying, the power in that information, that in a couple of minutes, if people just started with that very simple act of naming the emotion, feeling emotion, where's that emotion in your body, breathing through it, going outside, and the word presence was showing up a lot. That is one of the most powerful things we can do for ourselves, no matter what the future holds. And that exact experience means when I walk into the Cancer Institute now after 50 plus visits, I am exactly so consciously present that I am not even, there is no fear. There is no anxiety. I have no fear. I wait to go through the double doors and I wait for what's coming next. And it can be learnt. And so if people were to, if people wanting to learn how to do this stuff, or it's not even do this stuff, it's actually the full process, right? And
Right.
it's healing. And you're helping people heal themselves through this gift. Where can people find you, Ben? We will put everything in the show notes, but where can people find you if they want to get in touch? And if they're in another country, can they work with you, or do they need to be in the US?
People can work with me remotely from any country. I am willing to travel. It's stayed in New York for quite a few years to train with this master from China, but gradually working my way out of New York. I've traveled back and forth to Sri Lanka, been there 15 times. And so if
Wow.
there's a stop along the way to Sri Lanka, I'm happy to stop over. If someone's willing to cover the expenses to get there and
Wow, that is
accommodations.
so cool. That is
Yeah.
great.
And sometimes, like I said, I've worked with people with cancer, for instance, and so sometimes doing sessions, like 4, 5, 6, 10 days in a row or something, even because that's a lot of these. Like if we're dealing with, say with cancer, for instance, there's the illness itself, but there's like a whole lifetime of all of the emotional wounding, like the woman I mentioned earlier, whose daughter drained the
Mm,
bank account with a debit card. The really toxic, destructive marriages. Even
mm.
uh, the father of this daughter was somewhat of a sociopath. Horror stories. So
Wow.
people carry a lot of history, and so we're cleaning that up and we're addressing the physiological. So sometimes it's like I said, it really hits me emotionally, but then on the other hand, when I see people recovering and thriving and adding years to their life and stuff, it is so rewarding, so meaningful, so fulfilling to me. I can do some work remotely. I mean, I could teach the practices remotely, but the most powerful work, just to be
Needs to be.
honest,
I
it's,
love that. Well, anyone up
yeah,
for a trip to well, we might not go to we'll meet you somewhere. Put it that way. How about that?
yeah,
Alrighty.
meet in
So
Sri Lanka
I met
or
you in Sri Lanka.
Australia.
So it's not far away at all, actually. So I know that you're doing a lot of work in relationship breakups at the moment.
Yeah.
And I know that there are going to be listeners out there who are living through cancer, their carers, their friends, their loved ones, professionals who are supporting that. But we all know someone who's had a breakup. Tell me a little bit about how you're doing that program at the moment.
I put together 2 programs. One is breakup first aid, and that's for people in the midst of the initial crash. They're right in the midst of the devastating breakup or divorce. They were ghosted. And that's the practices to get people on their feet, to cycling through that devastation. And then there's the deep dive, which is heal my heartache. And so that goes much further. There's a lot more to it. And that's a bit more expensive because I'm actually including individual sessions
Yeah,
within the program itself. And the reason why is a lot of people can go through courses and they learn stuff or whatever, but it goes so deep. But what I find is the greatest transformation is when I have the opportunity to work with people, especially if I get to work with them in person. My main website where people can reach me is my name, benoofana.com. And there is a contact form on the website where you can message me. I do respond to messages. If by chance you don't hear back from me, just assume I didn't get the message. I do have a
right.
Google Voice number, but I don't know. Like it depends what country someone's in. Sometimes it's
Mm,
hard to return calls. So I would say go to my website, message me. You can leave a message on my Google Voice, 332-333-5155. I had to be careful about giving my main phone number out, because of the spammers and all that.
that's
I don't
right.
want to get
Exactly
bombarded.
right.
But once you connect with me, then I could hand you my number. Once you know who I am and we're actually talking, I can give you my number and we could talk on WhatsApp. You can find me on Facebook Messenger. I think some of the very right wing people might be offended by me or something. I'm very unapologetically pro-democracy.
You're allowed to be whatever you are. This is apolitical, but with that said, I believe everybody is absolutely allowed to have their own free voice in whatever they believe.
Yeah. And there's another website, teachmetomeditate.com, because I
Excellent.
teach a whole range of meditation practices I developed, and I teach Qigong practices as well. And again, there's the websites breakupfirstaid.com and there's healmyheartache.com. So those are the main websites. You can find me on Instagram.
So we're going to put all of those links for you into the show notes. So make sure if you do want to reach out to Ben. But Ben, on a final note here, my last question for you today is, if someone was listening today and they take one thing away, what would you want it to be?
I think the important thing is that we all face challenges in our lives, and there's a tendency to contract around our emotional wounding, the adversity that we experience. I think what's important is to the best of our ability, embrace life. Whatever challenges that we may be facing, whether it's cancer or some other chronic or debilitating illness or injury, there's so much uncertainty right now, and there's a lot of anxiety. But to the best of your ability, embrace life. Whatever you're faced with, embrace life. And do cut down to some degree on the news, social media. I fear I can be like a little too much on it myself, I'll confess. And work with the practices and work with the therapeutic interventions that will facilitate your healing. Like the fact that I carried a lot of this profoundly deep emotional wounding, a lot of trauma. And so my mindset is like, okay, well, I don't like a lot of these realities I'm dealing with, but I'm going to embrace what I'm faced with. And I'm going to do everything I can to utilize this to heal and transform myself. And I'm going to do the practice. I began to explore all these different therapeutic interventions and to be thorough with both the practice and therapeutic interventions. We live in this age of digital technology, or we have our smartphones, other devices, we're on social media, we're scrolling, and it rewires our brain so that we could hardly hold our focus for any significant period of time. And I have the advantage of training in two different lineages, a traditional Native American doctor and a master from China and this ancient Taoist systems. Best of your ability, work with the practices like I shared earlier, and I can teach you a lot more of that over the phone or in person, and make use of these interventions and be thorough, because a lot of people, because of the way our brains are being rewired, short attention span, we jump from one thing to another. But in order to address whether it's cancer or other serious injuries or catastrophic illness or these deeply entrenched patterns, if we carry trauma from our childhood, it really takes that dedication, that commitment, that discipline in order to heal. If we just dabble, we won't get that far. But if we have the discipline and commitment and we follow through, we can make tremendous progress. If you do the practice, do at least 5 or 10, 15 minutes if you can. I will do a few hours a day, generally, a few hours of intensive practice. And this is what the yogis in India, this is what in the Taoist system, lineages and Buddhist monks. And you'd have people that develop extraordinary gifts and capabilities, capacities. And so there's so much more that potential that we haven't realized, that we haven't tapped into. So the more you embrace life, work with the practices and interventions, you heal, you transform yourself, and you live much more fully. So that's what I leave people with.
I love it. And thank you. Look, thank you so much for being on Serenity Rising today. Fascinating to hear your experience of living through life with such gifts from such mentors. So thank you for being here. And also want to thank our listeners. Thank you, listeners, for being along. Thank you, my friends. Really appreciate you, love and support you. And as I always say, guys, the moments matter because the moments make memories, and let's make every day count. Catch you on the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great having you here. And what I would love you to do is leave a comment or ask a question using my fan link below this episode and on every episode that we post. I would love to hear your thoughts, your questions, and I'll get back to you. Have a great day and bye for now.